Welcome to Revenue Mind, where revenue leaders get real about mental health. I'm Julie. Stick around for honest stories, practical insights, and why well-being is the real bottom line. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome to Revenue Mind, a podcast where revenue leaders talk all things mental health. I'm Julie, your host, and with us is Nikki. Welcome, Nikki.
Hi. I'm excited to be here.
Hello. Yeah, I know. When I reached out, I was like, she looks awesome. And I'm like, yeah, no prep, sorry. So, so I hope you're excited. It's gonna be a wild ride, but like in the best way. Um,
I am a fly by the seat of my pencil skirt kind of girl, so
that's
we'll
what
have
I
a good
got.
time.
I got that impression. I'm like, she's gonna rock it. All right, cool. So the first question I typically ask is, what makes you you?
Oh, well, let's see. You'll find out very quickly. I kind of think in frameworks. I think in frameworks and I use excessive alliteration. You will get sick of it. So I have three that I'll share as far as what makes me me. As far as the things that get me excited that I love, it's three things. It's words, wigs, and women in charge. Words because I am a writer and it's my love language. Like I respond really well. I'm lit up by well-arranged words. And it's something I do for a living as a seller. I don't know that people think of writing, especially now that AI can write anything. I don't want people think of writing as a hard sales skill, but it still is. I maintain that it still is. You want to be teaching the computer how to talk like you, not teaching the computer how to talk, instead of you. But anyway, so words, wigs, women in charge. Wigs because I insist on wearing hair as an accessory. I I insist on wearing hair as an accessory. It changes all the time, and there was a part of my career where I would suppress that. A lot of it had to do with, I worked in environments where I was often the only black woman, and I didn't want to like have people look at me sideways, like, "Why was your hair this color the other day? Now it's long and straight. It was short and curly." And then I was like, "I'm thinking too much about this. Put the wig on, girl." So, so that's where the wigs come from. And women of charge is along those lines, right? I think when I entered the sales profession in particular, I was as always, right? Leaders will recommend books. They'll say, follow this person on LinkedIn, do this, do that, right? And I noticed that a lot of the time those recommendations were almost all males. And listen, I love male as much as the next girl who loves males, but I and I learn from them all the time. I have a lovely husband. We've been together for 20 years, so I get it. But kind of subtly could send this message, right? That sales expertise doesn't come from women, right? That the people we want to learn from by default are not women. And so I'm not with all that noise. So that's where the women in charge comes from. I don't know if I'll run you through all the frameworks. It's a lot. The second one though, as far as like what I apply to my work, it is range, riz, and revolution. So the range is that if anybody who follows me on LinkedIn and I don't know who knows if the people listening here do. But anyway, I talk about a wide range of topics. In me, they're all connected, right? Like, if I'm talking about sales and I'm talking about culture, it all comes from the same place in me that understands the way that culture impacts outcomes, right? I have the newsletters that I write have a lot to do with politics, societal sort of dynamics, and all of that. And then the next day, I'll be dissecting, somebody's pipeline, right, or a revenue model. So that range, and I'm hilarious. Just kidding. But so that so that is the range, right, where I'm learning coming from. It's what I consider my superpower. Riz, just that's again me not suppressing who my personality as it comes through. It is quirky. Sometimes it is youthful in a way that people don't understand, given the fact that I'll be 45 this year. But so I remind myself in this framework using that word to don't lose sight of that and keep it up. And revolution is, yeah, I have a heart for liberation. So you'll see that come out in a lot of my writing and the things that I talk about. I just want to see everybody included and, set up with, dignity and opportunity. So there's that one. Last one, I promise. Um Mindset, moxie, magic. And this specifically is me as a seller. So as a seller, one of the first things that I had to change was my mindset. I was selling cars, but I was transitioning specifically into selling SaaS. And so one of the first mindset shifts was, I thought you had to know a lot about technology to be a tech seller. And that mindset was holding me back, right? I'm not a technologist. But what I am is an exemplary communicator, right? I am that. And that is actually what moves people in a sales situation. So once I changed that mindset, I moved on to Moxie. This is closely related to the Riz in the previous previous framework, but it's like now you do. Now that I've changed my mindset into what I am, right? What I'm allowing myself or encouraging myself to be, what will I do with it? Where will I show up in ways that prove I'm not scared? And then that just comes out in sort of creative ways that I do outreach that require me to come out of my comfort zone. So that's Moxie, and the magic is the relationship, sort of like what you and I are doing right now. It's the relationships that draw to me, whether they end up, work opportunities or not. Right. The magic is we need community as sellers. And it's easy to overlook that because we're so often competing with each other. But in my best as a seller, I am understanding how that specific piece of it, right? The magic of how we create these relationships, what we put into them, and therefore what comes back to us. I see that in pipeline, and I see it in real life, just in the connections that I've made. And that's me.
Love that answer. Like, so many frameworks that I'm gonna put in the show notes, number 1, and number 2, gonna, like, follow. Um, that is awesome. Uh, question actually, I have a few questions for you, but first one, how'd you get into writing?
Well, I suppose the way most people do, the way most people find what their gifts are. Usually, you're small, and some adult has encouraged something in you that sort of came naturally to you, but it took someone to say, "Hey, that's special. You should run with that." And I had this English teacher in 7th grade, Mr. Nelson. He was very new, and the kids could have run him ragged, but he knew how to put his foot down. At the same time, he noticed that a lot of the time, instead of sort of, walking the halls or doing the lunch thing when we had like breaks or wasn't called recess because it's junior high, but whatever those were, I would stay and write. He would give these every day in class, these creative writing prompts, and the prompts were about who we think we are, which who's even asking 7th graders that? Shout out to Mr. Nelson. But that's when I learned, again, it's part of me, right? This connection between words on page and how they come out of me. What is my voice, right? And what does that feel like to stand and speak in it? And then to have it reinforced and encouraged at that age by this person who like knew what he was talking about because he was of course my teacher. That just kind of stayed with me, and the more that I wrote, the more I started to see again, like, this is the way that I'm thinking about things and putting them on the page is rare. This is probably the most compliments I've given myself in a row, and it's starting to feel a little strange, but it's all I can do is tell you the truth.
I love that. No, that's awesome. I mean, like, I feel like as women especially, we're so prone to, "Oh, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm apologizing for existing." And it's like, "No, we're fucking badasses, man. Like, start your stuff, please." I'll compliment you, don't compliment yourself. So it's gonna come at you. You brought something to mind when you talked about how sales were very competitive, and there's also this sense of community. I was curious if you could expand on that.
Sure. Yeah. So the competition piece of it has shifted, has sort of morphed since I started been selling something or other for 20 years, the last decade or so, in SaaS. And the biggest shift, of course, is the fact that we're not always in the same room. So a lot of the things that would cause you to be sort of red faced and filled with envy and competition don't actually happen in person anymore. So it's easier to manage the intensity of that. At this, like, there's less feeling confronted by the leaderboard because you're not seeing it in the same room with all your other folks. So that element of it has sort of shifted, which gives way, which has made it easier for us to be vulnerable with each other, for us to let our guards down and not all pretend like we went to President's Club every year and not all pretend like, oh, we never miss quota. That was a huge part of the culture when I came into the game. That has shifted in what I would call the right direction, thankfully. And I think a lot of what that has to do with, I keep telling myself I'm going to start a series about this on LinkedIn, but I probably won't. But there's some recent history to do specifically with B2B SaaS sales and community that I think a lot of people coming into the profession now missed, but it could benefit from. So in 2019 and 2020, when we were all sort of dealing with, what happened with George Floyd, like as a community, especially in the States, right? There was a lot of uproar, right? And unsettledness happening. And then, oh, by the way, COVID. So you had this group of people in sales folks these extroverts who are used to being in the same room with each other, who are used to feeding off of that energy and that sort of getting us through the day, the ups and the downs, who are now not only isolated because of remote work from that environment, but also isolated just from any relationships out in the world, because at that time we were sheltering in place, right? So, or social distancing, I should say. So from that, there came these online sales communities, right? You might recognize some of the names. One of them was Thursday Night Sales was one of the first ones. I created with a couple other sales leaders, Kyle Coleman, Josh Roth, Nisha Parikh, and Tom Bocard. We created SDRDefenders, another aspect of, how do we take these uncertain, unprecedented times and help people feel reassured right through community. And then one that I'd say I'm most proud of is a community called Sales for the Culture. So like I said, this was during this time of sort of social unrest. A lot of that social unrest was disproportionately impacting Black and brown sellers. And so there was a community. The community existed before me, called Sales Brothers and Sisterhood. And this was started by some of the pioneers of SaaS. So you're talking about Morgan J. Ingram and Kevin Dorsey are some of the names of folks who were involved but the reasons were so similar, right? Which was that a lot of workplaces will have an ERG, but it is just something different to be a Black seller. And it's something, a lot of us were the onlys on our team. So it began to function as sort of an external ERG where, say something just happens in the world to do with unrest that's disproportionately impacting us as people of color. We can come to this space as sellers and have that vulnerability and talk about some of the things we're hearing in the workspace that maybe make it a little more difficult to feel included. And also, here's what this workspace is doing right. And so to get a sense of belonging. And so it was that. Now that times are less intense, it's more about helping people skill up in their roles and helping people, again, just like find that community and new opportunities. But yeah, that's one of the ones I'm really proud of, because like I said, these things impact outcomes. And so if we ignore community in sales and over-index on competition, it puts us in an ugly place, I think.
That's what you did with that is incredible. There are some people that will complain but do nothing. You
Mhm.
saw a problem, you did something. So that's pretty commendable.
Yeah,
See, I
more.
told you to give you compliments.
Thank you. It's another little piece of, it's not quite a framework, but yeah, like I think about it this way, right? Because it happens, all of us, whether you're a person of color, woman, whatever, right? You go into a work environment and you right away start to get an idea for the culture. And the impulse, a lot of the time, can be to sort of stand around the water cooler and, you know, talk about it, complain about it, right? And there's a place for complaints. I'm not one of these people that's like, I'm complaining, shut up and sell. No, no, we get to talk crap about these places. But the more constructive thing to do you can criticize culture or you can create culture. And I think that a lot of the time sellers underestimate our role in an organization to create culture. right? Nothing happens until something gets sold. Again, we tend to be some of the personalities in the building. And our job is to be skillful at influencing not just decisions, but influencing ways of thinking about things. And so, if you take that very powerful set of skills and qualities and you apply it to the culture, of a work environment and my what I'm pushing for, the culture of a society, right? Of a country, then who knows, right? What you could get if the people most skillful at selling ideas are selling the most inclusive ideas, right? Are selling the most inspiring ideas, ideas that take us forward. Think about what things could look like. And so, yeah, it's just about encouraging salespeople to understand and lean in to that skill and those qualities that we have. All of us have better outcomes when we do.
So you mentioned that during COVID and all the things that were happening, the social unrest and it was terrible. So many things that happened that I won't I have no right to speak to. Um, but you mentioned that people of color were treated differently in sales. Do you mind kind of giving examples or expanding on that just for the audience? I think it'd be really enlightening for them to hear.
Sure. I do. I will come back to this. You said you don't have a right to speak on it. Yes, you do. But a lot of the time I see these are tricky waters. So, not knowing what to say, I'm familiar with that. I'm an ally to many communities that don't have anything to do with being a woman or being black. And stuff gets clumsy. You don't always know what to say or feel like you have the right to speak on it. And I like to create a safe space for people to be able to just say that and feel that vulnerability and know that, like, you're talking to me, you will be heard. I'm believing in people's hearts. I think that's all we can do. And if somebody shows up and says, I want to be part of the solution, I'm going to welcome them, and that means letting people speak. So it comes down to this conversation of, is sales a meritocracy, right? It always comes to that when we talk about, are things different for black sellers versus other sellers? Because if at the end of the day, a fair, I understand making the point that at the end of the day, we're all responsible for quota. And if you sell good, right, you're going to have equitable outcomes as everyone else. My challenge to that is that that assumes an even playing field in where people are coming from. It assumes the absence of implicit bias, and it assumes intentionally created policies and norms in this place that are doing belonging and inclusion on purpose. Not having any of those things, I don't think necessarily makes a leader or an organization, a villain or unfit. I think again, it's just not something, especially now where that's even being rolled back, but it's just not a conversation that we're having from the sales perspective a lot of the time because we just be out here trying to sell. But again, if we know it's one of the most stressful jobs ever, and we know that mindset and confidence are two of the most important qualities that a salesperson has to have. If you take a seller who is from a background, I'll use myself as an example. As a Black woman, many narratives precede me when I walk into a room, and I am conscious and aware of that. And the difference is, right? It's not necessarily you as a counterpart. There are narratives that precede you as a woman. There are not narratives that precede you as a Black person. And a lot of the narratives that precede me as a Black woman are negative, are the kind specifically that scare people from working alongside someone that don't have anything to do with me, but that are built into a level of implicit bias, for better or for worse, whether people know it or not. And most people don't. It's the meaning of the word, right? So that it's already going to be a different, type of experience. And then when you add to that the things that start to happen in the world and what the conversations are like, right? And who can chirpily talk about their weekend and who can't, who can put out of their mind feeling like their demographic is in the literal crosshairs, right? And who can't. And so as a Black woman, there is a lot that I have to do to get to that even playing field. I have to make it even myself in my mind. There's a lot I have to do to get to that same baseline from which the typical seller who's not in these groups has to. Not that person's fault, not the org's fault, but it's something that we can care about and mitigate if we want to. And I think we should want to. So we're not talking about abandoning the idea of merit. What we're actually talking about is assuming merit exists, because that's actually what we haven't been doing. I sold and worked in DEI for a long time. And one of the number one questions when I talked about hiring inclusive and diverse sales teams, the number one rebuttal to that is, well, we just want to hire the best people. And then I'm asked to make the ROI case for hiring a diverse group of people. That ROI case has existed through studies like McKinsey's for a long time about the increased profitability and innovation of those types of environments. But before we even get to that, let's really just examine that very first statement. Well, we just want to hire the right people. If you are saying that, the assumption is that you are more likely to hire the right people. I can see this by your habits, right? You're more like you believe there is an assumption, maybe you're not aware of it, that you will more likely find the better candidate, the best candidate in this pool versus a more diverse pool. And now you've also asked me to make the ROI case. I'm just going to ask you this and hold your hands with a napkin in between. When is the last time that you asked someone for the ROI case for hiring the same young white male out of college that you have been hiring? My guess is that you've never asked someone to make that ROI case, because implicitly in your mind, that ROI case is the default. There's no reason why you shouldn't be that way growing up in the environment that we grew up in. We're inundated, right, with these ideas that pull us back into a level of tribalism, a level of, like I said, right, familiarity and defaulting to that. It's why we have to be intentional. It's why we have to create environments where vulnerability, right, and being clumsy and maybe not saying the right thing are allowed, are safe. And it's why we need to continue to apply, right, the people who are most skilled at inspiring and selling ideas and moving people to action to that sort of thing in an organization. And I think that's salespeople.
Love it, love it, love it. You summed it up perfectly. For me, being a, white woman, I definitely have advantages. Where I don't is being Jewish.
Mhm.
Uh, it's, Shapiro. It's pretty easy to tell,
Yep.
if you know what to look for. And I actually grew up in Miami, and, I was a minority in Miami, and to your point, I feel like anyone that's scared of the unknown is gonna be a nasty SOB to someone that to someone that's different, that they're threatened by because maybe they're smarter, prettier, richer, but because they don't deserve it, right? Because they're not the person that they're familiar with. I think it's just so I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't gotten into a societal conversation like this in a while, so this has been pretty sweet. But, no, I really I don't like I said, I don't wanna pretend to understand what you go through, but I can relate in a way where I have to there's that underlying kinda like when you said you walk into a room, there's already opinions. I have the same
Mhm.
thing,
Mhm.
and it's
Mhm.
hard. It is not fun.
What I also want to do is that you bring up something that's really important, and that is the distinction between what are our structural experiences with, a lack of inclusion and belonging, and then what are our interpersonal experiences with a lack of inclusion and belonging. A lot of the time in these conversations, we if it's a white woman speaking, right, to a group full of people of color, and you kind of seem like you expected that, it is easy to dismiss your interpersonal experience because it's often not backed by something structural. I would argue that as a Jewish person, there is something structural. But at the same time, when we focus on, rather than dismissing your interpersonal experience and saying, yeah, but it's not the same, right? We know it's not the same. What can be learned from your interpersonal experience such that if we applied that thinking to the way that we think about the structural experiences and how we react based on that, what could we learn and what could get better? And what I came up with in thinking about that, and I worked at a place called, it was called Inclusive. We spelled it in a cute way, but what I was selling, which was one of the most difficult things I've ever sold. Basically, we're selling conversations. We're selling inspiration, right? There was a tech aspect of it, but mostly that's what it was about. And when I sat in these conversations, right, rooms full of, people from different backgrounds, some of them having the same, tentativeness that you had to have this conversation, but then also feeling, yeah, I think I can relate to what it's like to not belong, but should I say anything because it's not connected to something structural, you know? And what I like people to focus on is, how did that make you feel? Do you need to agree that a structural thing exists? Because people want to argue with me about whether or not white privilege is real. And I don't know that that's even productive interpersonally. It should be, in an academic setting, we should have that conversation. But by the time we're having a me and you conversation, I'm not going to try and convince you, right, that your personal struggles meant nothing, did not impact your outcomes. They certainly did. But again, what I want to call your attention to is, how did that feel? The only question in a workplace setting on a sales team that we have to answer next is, do you want to be responsible for other people in this environment feeling the way you were made to feel? Whether you agree with me that white privilege exists, whether you agree with me that these structural issues should have, make the case on their face for programs, that are intentional about DEI and all of this, right? Doesn't matter. Keep your red hat. Wear it proudly when you're out of this place. But here, do you remember that time that you were made to feel like you don't belong? Will you behave differently? Don't have to think differently. Will you behave differently in this environment? And the way that I talk about it, you ready? This is a framework coming at you. Is most of these programs, and I think this is why there was a backlash, right? A focus on do's and don'ts, right? Do not do these things, right? Or do these things or don't do these things so that you won't be sued, shamed, or fired, right? Which is fine. It's necessary. The apparatus of DEI and all of those things, right? Part of that was, right, what is the recourse for when people are treated, unfairly, right, in this place? But again, there's a resentment for that. And usually the resentment is coming from the folks whose behavior we most want to change. So it's just going to be this round and round, or this unless we put people in a room and make it safe and say, don't focus on the do's and don'ts, how to not get shamed, sued, or fired. Focus on the wills and won'ts. I will behave differently in this environment so that I won't have a negative impact on somebody else's experience at work. So all that's required of you is to care about how your behavior impacts other people. It's not required of you to vote differently. It's not required of you to change your ideology. None of that. There's nothing to resist. You know what I'm saying? And then if you find yourself in a place where you're resisting, being a force that makes the people in this work environment feel safe, well, then there's another conversation to be had. Then there's a question as to whether or not those workplace values are appropriate for this environment. But we can't have that until we get to a place where we've respected that nuance and created a safe space to have the conversations.
Well, this has been great. Is there anything I haven't asked you? Anything you wanna share with the audience?
No, this was so much fun. It has been a lot of fun. You create an environment here that makes it easy to be myself. And your vulnerability really, I think, enriched the conversation, encouraged parts of me that I didn't even know were going to be relevant to this conversation to come out. And so I hope that you and I, growing and having this conversation isn't where that stops. I hope that people listening will feel encouraged to, be that safe space, create that safe space, say the clumsy thing, and as long as we're all, trying to row in the same direction.
Love that. Where can we find you? I know you're on LinkedIn, but would if you wanna do any shameless plugs, feel free.
But really, that's what I'm focused on right now. I've had I mentioned to you the audience there, the things I'm talking about there. So I'm taking a little break. I'm in an AE role right now, and so I've kind of been giving that all my energy, but I'm ready to emerge and start leading the conversations on just what we've been talking about here today on LinkedIn. I think salespeople need it. I think we need it just as a society, right? To be like reminded, like, yes, stuff is hard. There's landmines in every conversation these days, but we don't get to stick our head in the sand, and we certainly don't get to pretend that each other don't exist, right? We won't survive that way, you know?
Completely agree. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much, Nikki.
Thank you. This was fun.
That's a wrap for Revenue Mind, where we cut the BS and spotlight mental health and revenue leadership. I'm Jolie, reminding you your mindset is your competitive edge. Thanks for listening. See you next time.